All right. Ladies and gentlemen, this is one of the new lights that I'm going to be using in here. I'm going to be replacing all these orbs. We're going to be doing a little bit more of tidying up. Me and Lauren are going to do some stuff to the walls, and it's going to be good. But I need some stuff also to read with. I bring physical things to read sometimes. I need to figure that out. Welcome to Book Club, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Book Club session number 7 for Malachi Martin's Windswept House. And joining us, as always, the co-host of this series is Timothy J. Gordon, TimothyJGordon.com. Timothy, you are lying on your side right now.
Yeah, I knew my head felt a little weird. What's up, Frank? I'm
good.
Trying different configurations. How the hell are you, buddy?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm really doing great. And I was saying before, I don't want this book to end.
I know. It took 350 pages for the action to really kick in, but man, it kicked in, and now it's too soon.
Yes, I know. It's just too soon. Just stop it already. So I guess the way that we should go about this is as we always do. Let us just go from start to finish from our, what happened along the timeline, and then just bring up key points, key things that we take away, things we thought. Then we go into the thread and into the chat rooms and see what people are saying as well. Overall feelings about this segment. Obviously, as you said, it's one where action continues to rise, but anything in particular you want to bring up? Go ahead.
Well, thematically, Christian Gladstone has come full circle to addressing the tension in his the mystery of the Slavic Pope from the Christian Gladstone point of view, which is to say the Catholic traditionalist point of view, which is really just to say the Catholic's point of view. And so Christian kind of represents me. Remember, we talked about his conversation with Carnesecca, where Carnesecca was like, much earlier in the book, hey, you don't understand this Pope. He's kind of New World Order guy, but he's kind of, he's definitely known as a conservative, but New World Order, what the heck? Have you ever considered that he's doing what he can? And then Christian, from that conversation until about the middle of the reading tonight, was trying to be open-minded. But now he's like, look, I listened to Aldo, and I just don't think this Pope's enough. And then, of course, it's Damian Slattery, who's his interlocutor. And Damian Slattery says, look, maybe it's the end of an era. Maybe it's the end of the pontifical era where there's even a Pope. And this is kind of what we're considering with Francis. So this was I took lots of screenshots. This was a huge thematic reading from my perspective.
Yes, it was. So let's just start from what I've got, and we'll obviously, because it's chronological, you jump in along the way, and we can trade quotes, and then we go to the audience. What I have here, opening up, is when we ended last time, we knew that JP2, the Slavic Pope, is preparing to go in for a surgery that seems to make a lot of people, his allies and his detractors and outright avowed enemies alike, all think that this may be the end. And anyway, he's preparing now for this surgery in the opening of this chapter, and he goes on to take note about how every person he considered to be a friend on the world scale has drawn away from him. And on page 445, it shows how he says it, of all the world leaders and public personalities who were so regularly in touch with the Holy Father, only one broke the strange silence that had lately fallen over them in this regard. And those eerie, turbulent days drew to a close. The Slavic Pope was alone and already in bed when, late on the eve of his operation, a brief note was delivered to him by hand. Quote, I cannot believe, Mikhail Gorbachev had written, that the providence of the Almighty will terminate your Holiness's services just at this crucial moment in human history. So the only thing he got was a brief note from Mikhail Gorbachev, who, as we know, is a central, well, not central, but a pretty important figure, because one of the big themes in this book is how everybody is jockeying around to reshape the world, to move us out of this Cold War era and to bring Russia into the fold, which the Pope is, which the Slavic Pope understands what game is being played. On that one, I have that coming up soon. But on page 446, we have Damian Slattery. He's obviously still licking his wounds here from being knocked around and almost excommunicated and defrocked. He's kind of on the run right now, and he's hanging out with Christian. And Tim, I love when these two are in the same room together. The most fantastic exchanges between these two characters. And here's another thing I got to say. I think it's another credit to Malachi Martin, Father Martin, as a writer, as how he so very clearly establishes characters' voices, so you know when you're reading it, it feels like two distinct people are talking. He never loses the voices of the characters, and I love that about this writing.
It's a hard thing to do. That's a very hard thing to do as a fiction crafter, and absolutely. And it's not just by using dialect and Irish brogue and tricks like that. Those devices help, but you know when the powerful, booming brogue of Damian Slattery is the dialogue, is what you're reading, and I can recognize Christian Gladstone's voice like that. So yeah, that's really, really remarkable. I agree.
So then here we have on page 446. What do I have here? He never loses the voice. I say that, but here we have at 446. Okay, so the whole this is where he starts letting loose on the Pope again. Yep. And he lets him have it in this private conversation with Slattery. He says, "This Holy Father is the key." Gladstone's face was flushed with anger. "Perhaps Father Aldo is right. Perhaps this Pope is the obedient slave of Our Lady. Perhaps he will bend to her Son's will as she gave it to us at the as she gave it to us at the Fatima. Perhaps he is looking at the bigger geopolitical picture and knows man in such a way that religion will have no place any longer. That Fatima message has to do with all of that. But maybe the Pope is just plain mesmerized by geopolitical change, and in the meantime, he's causing more problems than any of us can solve." Now, he went on to say more and more of that, and then exactly what you brought up before, Tim. This was one of those paragraphs I had to bookmark immediately. Slattery delivers what I would have to imagine at least a few of us were waiting for somebody to say. He said this on page 447. Slattery was frozen into silence. This is after Christian really just emptied the tank. He said, even that afternoon at the Angelicum, when he and Chris had another Donnybrook over papal motives, he hadn't heard this kind of sentiment from the young cleric. Suddenly, Damien's own crisis didn't seem to matter so much anymore. And he goes on to say, "There is another possibility, Christian." As deep as it was, Damien's voice sounded like a whisper after Gladstone's barrage of accusations. Quote, "It is just possible, it's just possible that from the very beginning of his pontificate, it was already all over. It's possible that the seeds of apostasy had already been sown and were already flourishing. It's possible that Christ had already given up on this version of the churchly organization. It's possible that, like Peter, this Pope was chosen by the Holy Spirit more for his weakness than for his strength, more for his lack of understanding than for his wisdom, more for his love of Jesus than for his understanding of what sort of kingdom Christ intends his creatures to build. Perhaps the Almighty has had enough of all the corruption, in other words, enough of this generation. Perhaps we're all destined to be replaced by a new generation, another race of Catholics, a better, truer, cleaner race. It's just possible that the Slavic Pope is in truth the last Pope of these Catholic times, and it's just possible that he knows it, and that he's known it all along." That right there.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That was the exact pair. We're always picking the same stuff to dog ear. This is profound. I mean, between 1996 and now, 2022, you'd say every second or third year, this prognostication, which is really, people weren't seeing it in the middle 90s in the church. It's grown more and more apparently true. I don't mean ostensibly like it's been proven false, but it's grown more and more clearly, obviously indisputable. And let me say this, Frank, I was talking to my wife about this while we were driving out to dinner tonight. I was talking about this exact page to her. And what I said is, look, this business with the availing time, which gets mentioned again about 10 pages before on, that's a little more than that. It's a little more than that. About 15 pages before, the availing time gets another mention. It's a real plausible explanation, because after the millennium, that's when there's been this springtime in the church, not based on the New World Order of Vatican II, but based on going back. And there have been young people that have come into tradition and realized, like me, I left the church because of the New World Order stuff and the modernization. They try to keep up with the world watchword of the Second Vatican Council. It's so obvious now that you see it as a Roman Catholic, and it's so obvious now that you see it that it's hard to believe that we ever didn't see it in the 80s and 90s growing up in the church. So I wonder if it has something to do, in a very real way, this is very speculative, with the availing time, which ended around 2000. You know, we didn't see how obvious it was. All of us who grew up in the 80s and the 90s in the church were like, well, clearly what they're selling us at Mass with the new liturgy, the new Code of Canon Law from 1983 that keeps being written about here, the new catechism from 1993 replacing the Catechism of Trent, which was based. All of these creatures of the post-conciliar church make it seem obviously tawdry. I never considered growing up as a teen or preteen making fun of these obvious novelties, tawdry, and obviously made to be tawdry novelties, that in reality, maybe this is some triple agency by the devil to make everyone, leave the church. So I was psyched up at that page that you read and you just bookmarked.
Yes, absolutely. And it was started making me think about just occultism now. If it did expire, if that availing time did expire, and just so that we're on the same page, first of all, your video cut out. Do you know that?
Oh.
Should we reconnect with the Mac?
Yeah, I could try. You know what?
It doesn't. I mean, you sound great. We can keep it up. Oh, it's up to you.
Is that better?
Oh yeah. You're back.
Okay.
I just didn't know if you knew what happened, but
I didn't know. Sorry.
I started thinking about that, and it just so that we're on the same page. The availing time, because of course that was brought up by the Capstone Council of 13 crew in a prior chapter. I know what you're talking about. That is the time that's been given to them, afforded them by the enthronement ritual, right? That's what they're talking about. Okay.
Yes, sir. So
then, what I was thinking of, if that really did expire in 2000, then one hell of a big sacrificial ritual would happen a year later in September. And to think about that link between the two, possible, that new daisy chain where you want to talk about bringing an entire world down to its knees through the events of September 11th. I mean, obviously this was all done behind closed doors, but it had a sacrifice, and the sacrifice was a giant one. And I don't know. That really is something to consider there, since it all had to be done for New Order purposes. Moving on from there then, because they get back to work right after this. They kind of like... they kind of shake off the rust of the back and forth, and they get back to work and piecing together all the stuff that they had been, the dots they were trying to connect, satanic dots. And what finally brings Christian, a little exchange again, brings Christian to consider that Mastriani isn't just a corporate stiff of a cardinal, that he may actually be helping facilitate something dark and something global. So he's finally starting, and we're going to get to that in a second. But here we go. That's quite the picture. Day by day, they huddled in the library, reviewing their records and names and dates and places, analyzing documents, activities each had collected and verified independently of the other. Getting down, that's quite a picture, wouldn't you say? Slattery studied Christian's map with the sickening disgust, because they put together the map of the homosexual priests, the pedophilia, the location of all the satanic covens. He says, it's a picture of a cover-up, but I can't figure out how such a thing is possible. Given the total number of bishops and priests in the country we're dealing with is relatively a handful. But we do have a big, dirty bubble in the center of the church over here, and yet no official is screaming. Are all the baddies in charge? Are all the good ones blind, or are they all just all little tiny types of Cardinal O'Clery? And they're frightened that if they had burst the bubble, the sludge had come out and cover their own faces with filth. Is that what it is? So now he says, out with it, Father Damien. Out with it, Damien. Christian was getting too good at reading Slattery's eyes. Now, when Damien came out with what wasn't the answer to Gladstone's questions, but a series of questions of his own, he says, doesn't it all seem to tie up, Chris? Don't you put it together, if you put it together, I mean... There's Cardinal O'Clery's decision to ordain 3 priests who have been shown to be homosexually active. There's the matter of all those pedophilic priests who are all moved about by their bishops, and the consistent refusal to lay aside known offenders. There's the special fund that the bishops have had to set up to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in out-of-court settlements. There's the evidence that Wogdilla, the detective, found linking Century City to Bishop Russiton in Virginia, and linking Russiton's mother chapel to the other dioceses all over the landscape. And now this map points to a de facto connection between pedophilic homosexuality and ritualistic Satanism among the clergy. And now it goes on down, and in the end, Gladstone had to ask the questions that might make his own situation untenable. If such an effort was underway against the church, how far did Slattery think it reached in the hierarchy? And then he asks, does it reach as high as Mastroianni and the other cardinals I've been working with? Do you suppose it reaches to that level? That's the first time that he asked the question. And then, of course, he vocalizes it on page 451 when he says, now, though Slattery had given another reason, if Lucadamo was right about the nature of the Strasbourg meeting, then Gladstone wasn't being groomed for anything. He was being used right now as a stupid pawn, as an unwitting gull in a filthy game of anti-papal politics. The work he had been doing for Mastroianni, those touchy-feely questions he had been asking the bishops concerning her perceptions of the Pope, all of those exhaustive debriefings in Mastroianni's office, all of the favors he'd been doing for bishops at Mastroianni's request, all of it being used to further a plot against the Pope. And he says, quote, you have no idea what's been going on. Christian took his fury out on himself and on Mastroianni. Quote, you don't know the extent of my career as a water carrier for those bastards. It's all supposed to be super confidential, and now I can see why. And we finally established that he is going to become now a double agent, which is great.
Yeah. I think of this scene. I was rereading right as I jumped on. I think of Edmond Dantes when he's been educated by the priest in Chateau d'If, and he's putting it together what all of the conspirators against him who put him in Chateau d'If and framed him for murder and treason have done, and he's trying to figure out the pyramid at the top. Who's the pyramid? And he's like, how did this work? And then when he figures it out, somehow the priest is really smart. He figured it out first. But then Edmund kicks the chair, and it's a major moment. That's how I imagined poor Christian in this scene, where he's figured out that he's been played, and now there's a number of ways to go about selecting the dish of revenge. It's a bitchin' scene. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh yeah, and the end of that scene right there is just another great example. I put this aside just because it's another great example of just good writing. A great way to end the scene and end the section. That is, as you just said, Chris is just beside himself, knowing he's been used, and he's putting it all together. And now comes Damien. Damien was already on his feet, but Chris still wanting some answer to his problem of how to handle Mastroianni and the others who had used him the way a pimp uses a whore. Well, I'll tell you, me darling lad, Damien unleashed his broadest brogue, as you said before, a grin to his to match it as well. But his advice couldn't have been more serious. He said this, and I just love this line. It's a great way to end the scene. He says, "It's the oldest formula in the book for men who are sent like sheep among wolves. When we get back to Rome, you'll be as wise as a serpent. You'll be as simple as a dove. In short, you'll be a priest." And
That's beautiful.
It's just great, and I love it.
That's what you call it. Right out of Scripture, right out of New Testament. It's like that. That's what a priest of Christ is called to be: is gentle as a dove and wise as a serpent. I got goosebumps when I read that line. Actually,
what did you,
Frank?
Yeah.
I'm gonna switch to a better connection. I've been trying it on my phone. I'm just gonna go to my setup here. I'll be right back.
Okay, you got it. Sounds good.
I apologize. Yeah.
No problem. No problem at all. Let me see here. I'll leave the link open so we can jump in again.
Yeah, I'm coming in. I'm
okay.
coming in right now.
Unmute your mic.
Admit, and you're back. Oh, wow.
Yeah, there it is.
There's switching around.
There it'd be. Yeah, I just now I can actually look at my PDF on my phone. I have all my shit marked on my PDF on my phone, so that's why I was disappearing when I was looking up pages that I broke.
I get you. Well, then let me ask you this. Let me just let you talk about this a little bit. What did you think about? I'll call it a coma dream for the Pope. Obviously, he's under the surgery is being performed, but he has this dream under the in this unconscious state as he's under the anesthesia, and it's very prophetic. He's trying to really get the attention of everybody, from Sister Lucia to Christian to Mastroianni. He seems to be pleading with everyone, warning them about a coming destruction, but no one hears him. And in the dream sequence, it's about a page and a half, nobody hears him. He's trying to get attention, and nobody's listening to him. And it ends with him abandoning all hope with everybody else and just asking for help and intervention from Archangel Michael. What did you think about this entire dream, what it signifies, and yeah?
Well, it's very interesting. Again, this is the third person omniscience greatest asset, this narrative tone, because we're sitting here puzzling out it's not the main question, but it's got to be a secondary or tertiary main theme in the book. The question about character that Christian Gladstone entertains vis-a-vis the Slavic Pope. He's talked to his two most trusted advisors about it now. Two of three, including that German priest that is a family friend. And he's trying to figure out John Paul II. Well, now we get a peek not only into the private thoughts of John Paul II, but the subconscious thoughts of John Paul II. And there's Fatima imagery.
A lot,
which insinuates good guy. I mean, for people out there that are like, what does all this mean? If somebody is a partisan of Fatima, it means they're a good guy. And John Paul II was known as a partisan of Fatima, though he's a bit of a riddle wrapped in an enigma. That's not just Christian Gladstone. That's all of us are like, what the heck? He hated communism. That's based, but he had this wild kind of let's invite all the world in without making them convert first ecumenism, and that's untrustworthy. That's the mark of the Masons in the church. So what I thought when I read with that sequence, Frank, is just, this is a peek inside his private thoughts, and this is a good sign. I mean, we're not being tricked by the narration. Mastroianni can't, jump into his thoughts and trick us. So it basically proved Slattery half correct in all of the machinations and guesses taken about the private motivations of JP2, and it made Carnesecca half correct. But it did confirm that JP2 is a man of goodwill, as the term goes. That's the main thing I thought.
Yes, it was definitely one of those things where I read it twice because it was just so much imagery flashing in your mind's eye as you read it there. And then speaking of Carnesecca, the very next thing is his death. We knew that they were coming after him. I didn't see any situation in which Father Aldo was going to make it to the end of the book, and it's a horrific death too. Someone had replaced his eye drops with a corrosive form of acid. It burns right through to his brain. Quick, he runs out of his bedroom screaming for help. He breaks his neck and God knows how many other bones on the way down a marble staircase, and that's just, man. Yeah, I thought that we were going to get news that he was run off the road, and of course they already tried that. But the acid in the eyes, Tim, damn.
Well, we've seen from the ritual killings, these guys mean business, and they're the most wicked guys in the world. And one of the prayers, we always say it within our rosaries, is prayer for a happy death. And that's something that I'm sure Carnesecca indulged. It's a common plea of the rosary sayer, but that he was not indulged in that aspect. So that's rough.
Well, the other thing that we don't know too much about just yet, that was another great little occurrence, was that he had made special arrangements to make sure that his diary was delivered safely to those he knows he can trust. So Damian Slattery and Chris are in possession of Father Aldo's diary, which I have to imagine is going to contain some kind of key clue, a key piece to what happened at the Mother Chapel, because of course he was actually privy to those documents in 1978 when they were making room for the Slavic Pope to come in after the September Pope died, or I guess that's what they called John Paul I, the September Pope.
Yes.
Okay, so
33-day pontificate.
Right, 33. There's another Masonic. Jeez, I mean, there's a lot. Oh, there's so much. All right, yeah. Let's see here. That's so after they killed Father Aldo on 457 here, I have this nice line that I think is really interesting, and I brought it up tonight on the show, where Christian is talking to himself. Maybe Slattery was right, he said. Maybe there was some theoretical cutoff point between Luciferian thinking and the outright dedication to the prince of this world. And I thought about that. It's really a big cultural phenomenon here in the United States, especially since those who are dedicated to those forces have first spent so much time getting people below them to believe that there is nothing to worry about, nothing to believe in. And you see it in the streets. You see it with everybody who has thrown themselves into these really horrible political movements, violent, racist, segregating, self-worship. It's just terrible. I just wanted to bring that up. It's a little bit of, once again, what kind of people we're dealing with today in the general population. But then we have a really, on page 463. Do you just want to weigh in there, Frank? I'm always this
principled puritanical equipoise on that question. I'm always like, there are two sides, right? You're for heaven or you're against heaven, but I don't know. There's an interesting case to be made here. It's a big question, we kind of know behind the scenes that Mastroianni knows more what he's doing than the two protagonists are guessing at. So what did you think? I thought it was really cool that they're wrestling with that theme.
I think I've never had any doubt in my mind that Mastroianni knows what he's advancing. I don't think so. I think
who's the only man he trusts? Who's the only man that he will take a note from without getting pissed off and without getting his
Benthok, right?
Knickers. Yeah, Benthok. That's as Luciferian as it gets.
Yeah.
So I think we have a little more info. What's that called? Dramatic irony. We have a little more info than either of our two protagonists, who are kind of guessing about it. We have that as a certitude that Mastroianni really is full card-carrying member.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, multiple times in this book, it has already come up how the ranks of Masons inside of the hierarchy itself is overwhelming, and I guess that would be a major part of the infiltration and the actual the plan there. there's so much there to even to talk about, especially when we get more into the Russian aspect. But but like I said, going ahead a little bit more to 463, there's a wonderful scene, a wonderful moment between Christian and his sister Trisha. I'm glad that she got this scene because you can tell that she was a doting daughter, a woman of faith, and one of those soft-spoken members of the family who was afflicted with one problem or another. But now we hear her, and we learn of her sacrifice and her almost like her deal that she made with God to help bring some kind of restitution in a wayward priest's life, and how her physical problems are a manifestation of something that she sacrificed herself for, and how still she's just so calmly supportive and a really warm presence there. And I'm glad that she got this scene because we didn't know too much about her character beforehand, and this was just really wonderful, I think.
Yeah, we've had insinuations that she worked out some deal with God, unilateral deal with God, and got that deal fleshed out finally.
Yes.
They've mentioned it a couple times, and you're like, did I miss something?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Now, here is the other thing we got. 469 to 471. We're getting closer to the end here. I think the last page was 479. This is where we have the Slavic Pope. This is where the Far East, Eastern Europe, Russia starts becoming a little bit more in frame here, and he's not being fooled by what the repositioning and the reshuffling of the world powers again. Here he says, never in world history had two such dire and thoroughgoing enemies, the former superpower adversaries of the Cold War, become so reconciled and so trustful in such a short time, and with so little ceremony as the capitalist West and the newly dismembered East. The Pope was too dutiful a pastor for the obvious religious significance of such a geopolitical shift to escape him, and he was too fine a geopolitician to doubt that the years since 1989 had been a seeding time for what was now about to wrap itself around the Society of Nations and the Roman Catholic Church as a universal institution. There's one other thing there. He pays sarcastic, dubious reference to the ouster of Gorbachev. He puts that in quotations, knowing it wasn't an ouster. This is all part of a deal. And then we have this on the page of 471, the bottom paragraph. What made the Slavic Pope's geopolitical antenna vibrate during his time of rest and recuperation at Castel Gandolfo were the results he anticipated from that seating. Is it not a wonder to behold? With a wry smile, the Holy Father asked Monsignor Daniel the critical questions. Is it not wholly new configuration of the once monolithically solid USSR a wonder to behold? And are not the bonds being forged between the USA and the new Russia under the title of Partnership for Peace an even greater wonder? Once there was the Soviet Union. Now in the blink of an eye we behold Russia, and we see all of its former component parts. All the former component parts, so-called new independent states, the NIS. Russia and the NIS are now described in the West as the CIS, the Commonwealth of Independent States. So he understands that there's a completely new shift in the reality of the world, and it's not in any way, shape, or form organic. And it does beg the question as to how staged, to a degree, and managed the entire Cold War was for slowly bringing the world to this point. Because we know, I mean, that our government was completely infested with Soviets during the height of the Cold War. So what was this really all about? The arms race, everything. Go ahead.
Yeah, like Venona Papers type stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you talk about this on your show. But
a lot.
And I've never gone through like all of them aside from the highlights. Foreign policy isn't my thing. Constitution and Thomism are my kind of two dual headings on my show. But the Venona Papers are, just in case you haven't said it more voluminously, which you probably have, absolute complete like vindication for Joseph McCarthy. So Yeah, I've only begun thinking along these channels, such as what you just said, Frank, over the last 2.5 years. Like, holy shit, this whole thing could have been COVID-19. You know, COVID-19 46 or whatever, the COVID-19 48. It could have all been staged. The world elites play on the same playground, and it's all kabuki theater. You don't want a black pill, but yeah. Are you there?
No, what black pill?
Well, are you fully there? I guess it's not a black pill. In a sense, it's a white pill, right? It's a white pill on the 20th century. But I mean, is that where you're at? Fully, just the Cold War is kabuki.
I'm starting to get to at least being able to accept that it's not what I thought it was. And if you can get to that point, then you're going to be your mind is going to be fertile for all types of new information and new perspectives. And as you're talking about now, I know that it's not fiction, but it's also a very big book. And maybe one day we can do a nonfiction book. And if we ever did that, I don't know if you ever read it. It's called Blacklisted by History. It's from
Heard of it.
His name, the author's name is M. Stanton Evans, and it's about the story of Joseph McCarthy. You want to see just how effed up this is. Man, oh man. I have to read it again. It's important to read it. I think that everybody should read it, but and I don't know how it would do in a book club just because it really is dense, but it is eye-opening. And yeah, this is huge right here, because in these pages in the 470s, they're really getting down into what's happening. And around 474 is where we have Guttmacher come back into the picture here. And 474, the one who verbalizes what's going on with Gorbachev and Russia and is Guttmacher when he meets with the Pope. So listen to this. It is... he says this is the bottom lines in 474 leading to 475. In his first and briefest session with the Pope, Guttmacher confirmed the Pope's analysis. Something new is starting over there, Holiness. It's happening almost in silence, but it's real. You can feel it. The people sense it. Yet I doubt if even a third of them yet realize what's really happening to their territories and nations, or to themselves as human beings. But there's always the exceptions, Father Angelo, the pontiff returned from the window in its shining blue vista of Lake Gandolfo. In that part of the world, there's always the ones who know. You've talked to many of them, I'm sure. Holy Father, what they're saying over there is that something has been set in stone. A new system is in place. Most of the people I spoke to don't like what's happened, but they stress to me their sense that the East and the West have reached a definitive settlement. They use that word all the time, Holiness, definitive. So you think about where we are right now, where those last of those Eastern Bloc states, the Scandinavian states, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, everybody trying to join NATO except Russia. And of course, Russia itself has been the target of these kind of hopefully infiltrative, a little bit more. Vladimir Putin has been on everybody's radar for a long time. The World Economic Forum, obviously KGB, you wonder where he came from and whether or not, of course, some people just start finding their own resolve and start thumbing their nose to who were once allies or handlers or whatever. And you wonder where we are right now at this point. But I'll tell you, there is some Illuminati, Freemasonic, Luciferian history here that started coming to mind that I've studied over the years, and I got to send you a link to a few things that you should listen to. But what I started thinking about was the whole idea that we are really just, it's a reminder that we're up against a 1,000-year-old death cult, or even more. And back during the Napoleonic Wars, all sides of that war were financed by different branches of the same banking family, the Rothschilds chief among them. And after the Napoleonic Wars were concluded between Russia and England and France and all this stuff, the Council of Vienna was called afterwards to attempt to actually bring a war-weary, broke world into a first form of the League of Nations. This is how far out they were trying to get this shit done. But
really?
Wow. But Tsar Alexander, though, in Russia, could probably pretty much smelled what the hell was going on and torpedoed the whole thing. Said no thanks. We're going to maintain our own sovereignty there. And many people who have studied these hidden chapters of history, or these more nuanced chapters of history, because people have learned about the Napoleonic Wars, but as far as looking at other parallel timelines, this is where most people said that the seeds for the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution was planted, because they were so pissed off that the Tsar, they wanted to destroy the Tsar for getting in the way. They wanted to be able to bring this down. And they brought in communism as a weapon. They introduced abortion in the 1920s. You have, I don't know if you ever read the absolutely terrible the Patesti experiments. You ever read that?
No.
This took place in communist Romania from between like 1949 and 1951. It is the most stomach churning, egregious torture sessions that I've ever read about in detail, that they were doing to Christians out there, the Communist Front. How they were forcing them into just sacrilege, and it is horrible. And you think about how this was all part of a front that was planned, and of course this is something that I always think about to remind myself that beyond all of the useful communist stooges out there, there is definitely a communion with something very dark, something very supernatural that's driving it all. And when I read these chapters now that get more focused on Russia, it makes me think just how we are still part of that same timeline, and maybe that destruction of Russia, the spilling into Asia, of course the infiltration in the United States. Then they got the Soviet Union, and if you have this kind of a fake war up against each other, where obviously there is some real tension there, but there's people that are invested again in both sides of it. What happens at the end of that fall, where you start learning new alliances, you bring everybody together, and Russia, which you would think that it was just at the end of a nearly 80-year scourge of atheistic communism, they might be brought to heel. But instead, slowly, very slowly, they started regaining some foothold in Christianity. They got rid of communism. They kept the police state, obviously, but they got rid of communism, and there's just a little bit of a turning. And maybe this is how hopefully they thought this was going to go with the reforming of the world, but that's just what's crossing my mind. I don't know how what I'm missing, though.
Did you know that in that's all very interesting, obviously. I'm not just talking past it. But on that note, in 1918, the emperor of... I'm actually friends with, by Twitter, he's a follower of mine and watches my show. One of the Holy Roman Emperor's relatives with the same last name.
What?
And a relative of Blessed Karl. Yeah, he in 1918, he was contacted by the P2 Masons. This is all on public record. And they said, you are going to be, together with the Vatican, the last European sovereign to be a monarchy. We're going to take you down. We're going to remove you. And the 20th century mechanism for using Masonry is going to be Marxism. And within 6 months, he was gone. It's not Blessed Karl. It is one of his pals in Austria-Hungary, right? And it's crazy stuff. But we've been promised, like me and my wife have been promised a tour of a castle if we ever go to Austria.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
It's based, but it's crazy. Like, I had always guessed at the stuff you're talking about, where I'm like, yeah, Marxism, Marx was a Mason, Stalin was a Mason, and then I know they outlawed Masonry and all that in Soviet Russia, but it seems like just a temporary, transitory mechanism for instituting Masonic, Luciferian globalism in the 20th century. And then I found that And boy, that's really, really convincing stuff when you can start piecing it all together.
I have to send you some links to Myron Fagan and a few other things. I think that you would some enjoyable listening. I think that you would really get a kick out of it. And I'm starting to think that there's just so much more here. And as far as finishing up the timeline of this book, we have the Slavic Pope. He's not fooled by this quick reunion between East and West. And then we have, after 475 with Guttmacher, we have a quick check-in on the scheming cardinals, led by Mastroianni, who are planning to have this common mind vote with the bishops by spring to establish that there is the common mind vote. By the way, that's what Christian Gladstone has been brought into. They're trying to establish that there is an irreconcilable disunity in the church, and that the use, they need to use that to force a resignation of JP2. And then finally, to end all of this, we get a lot of references in this section that we've been reading for this week. A lot of references to Fatima, as you said, and the Blessed Mother's 1917 warnings, but none more prominent than the end of chapter 41, when Father Guttmacher presents the Pope with this gruesome Russia video cassette that depicts how babies are being aborted, slaughtered, and their parts are being categorized and made to order, which we know is going on right here. It's publicly funded. The NIH is doing it, Planned Parenthood, but this was back then. And I think it's around page 479, it's the end here, is where I think we get a little bit of a nod to some sliver of what was in the Third Secret, where he says this: the Pope was too horrified to speak for some time after the tape had ended, too horrified, too stunned by the parallel between the gross, organized, market-oriented atrocities he had watched and what he knew had been predicted in the Fatima message of 1917. Now, knowing that the author of this book read The Third Secret, to think that any sliver of that would be, of course, the wholesale slaughter, abortions, just a human meat grinder culture that is coming to such celebratory levels right now, as gut-wrenching as it is, I can see why, if that is just even a thumbnail sketch of the kind of stuff that's in The Secret, I can see why Father Martin would always say to people guessing what was in it, no, it's not horrible enough. So
yeah, remember the section around page 430, Frank, where he's talking, who is it? It's the American CIA guy. Shit, I'm just slipping all of the names.
Appleyard.
Appleyard, thank you. You're always all over these names.
That's okay.
That's good. Yeah, Appleyard's talking about the U.S. as the main importer-exporter of abortion in contraceptive control, population control. And they talk about the secret sale of aborted baby parts. And it's like they have a secret way to ship it underground, and it's like a pink juice. It's horrible, horrible, horrible stuff. Also, about 20 pages before that, there is another reference to abortion. The pedo-satanic priests are using aborted baby parts that they talk about, like mobile graveyards for them, which I knew a priest that got in trouble for being a pedo in one of my hometowns. I won't say who had, it was rumored something similar. I'm not naming names here, but it made me think of that too. Whereas before I just figured, maybe he's giving some burial ground to aborted babies. Now it's like the aborted baby market is a huge black market, and it's hugely important for the anti-sacrament of abortion for the black masses. It's a huge thing. So there are big abortion tie-ins this last reading that I haven't gotten since then. Remember, The Third Secret, I think, is all about, the apostasy in the church, and everyone loses when there's apostasy in the church. And stuff like abortion is very closely tied to it through the black masses that keep coming in and out of the action.
Yeah. That seems like it would be, hell. That's where we're heading toward right now. And I want to get into some of these people in the thread now. From Summer 711 says, page 445, Gorbachev sends the Pope a well wish while no one else does. What is the significance of that? 475, that's 445. 475, why doesn't Mastroianni want him to go to Russia? Yes, doesn't want him to go to Russia. Because I think Mastroianni, I think that he knows how dedicated to Fatima and the Blessed Mother the Slavic Pope is. And at the very least, as we know from the beginning of the book, he was just so, he thinks it's very cringe. At the very least, he thinks that the entire devotion is cringe and old-fashioned, and he's part of a process that is trying to strip away old supernatural traditions from this new world order that they're trying to bring in. I don't know if it go. Tim, obviously, if you see that going even deeper, then it probably. I don't see why it wouldn't go deeper, but I know on the very surface level, that would be one thing. He thinks the entire devotion to Fatima is very cringe and needs to be done away with if we're going to secularize the church in any quick timeline.
The deeper layer is that the Vatican engaged in official policy from the 60s through the 80s, through the late 80s, called Ostpolitik, which was don't do anything to piss off the church in Russia, the Orthodox Church in Russia, or the Russians. This is according to famed exorcist, who I know you're interested in some of his works, Frank, who was sitting 5 feet away from JP2 when he was supposed to do the consecration of Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. It was like the 9th time it had failed in 60 years. A group of dark prelates, probably the Mastroiannis of the real world, surrounded him, and according to this famous Vatican exorcist, who we've talked about in a couple of our shows, said that they were just saying, no, don't mention Russia. Now, the other half of this is that Russia, according to the second secret of Fatima, is supposed to be, after the end of the Cold War, a part of the solution. So, and there's even a 2012 prophecy by an Italian mystic, Catholic, who says that Kiev and Russia relations have something to do with Fatima. And he said this before Benedict left the pontifical chair. So it's very deep stuff, and I don't know exactly what the implications are, but Russia is entirely woven into, I don't want to say eschatology, but the JP2 pontificate and the deeper implications of the JP2 pontificate via, like you just said, Frank, Fatima.
Well, there you go. We just went deeper. Page 476. This is still from summer 711. Another mention of the pictures of Helsinki on Mastroianni's apartment. What is the significance of this repetition? There was another summit there in Helsinki. I think it's just, I don't know. I haven't thought about it, though, so it's a good observation, because I didn't even think about it, that there's more to it. I just figure that Mastroianni likes to be surrounded by the pretty things he's collected along his journeys, which, of course, is all part of a side business that he has created from his office in Rome. 477, more on the U.S. population control. At 478, selling the fetuses. I got chills reading this. Like Frank said, this book is turning out to be a manual for navigating our current time. Kenzel says the population control section made my mouth agape. Things we already knew corroborated once again by another source. There are no coincidences here. At CM Maxon said, I'm so glad that you summarized this chapter. I read the first chapters in one day and then stumbled through the last chapter for days, unable to focus. I was just asked someone to bullet point so I could retain it, so thank you. Kenzel again says, as a Christian and Slattery discuss, Mastroianni is truly Luciferian in the nature or just a pro-Luciferian elements of the church, Vatican to be facilitated throughout the new church via the process. Gladstone finally realizes and admits to himself that Slattery had been used, he had been used as a pawn in the anti-papal plot. Yes, so everybody saw that too. It's great for him to finally come around to it. Page 471. In 1991, at the Waldorf Astoria in New York, Henry Kissinger, officials from the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, Carnegie Endowment, the International Peace, the Ford Foundation, and Pew and Mellon funds all guaranteed to supply Gorbachev Foundation with a startup of $3 million. This could have been lifted from the killing of Uncle Sam. Yeah, absolutely could have. That book is amazing, too. So many great quotes have stuck out to me in this book. Many have related to my own struggles of this world, and here's another. I'll end with this. This is from Tricia. Quote, God's purpose in allowing evil, Father Angelo told me once, is to bring about a greater good. He said that in the victory of Christ, each holy victim is victorious, and he said that in the victory of each victim, Christ is again victorious.
Beautiful.
Yes. Let's see here. Appropriate Mess, 1911, says, I am continually floored by this book's parallel to today. For example, Slattery is punished by the Century City Cardinal for snooping around too much. I instantly thought of Archbishop Cordileone in San Francisco being passed over for promotion for, well, doing his actual job. One thing I'm curious about regarding the description of satanic activity, like in the prologue, I know that priests and religious are a special target of the devil, obviously, but I just keep wondering, how do they become involved with it to start with? How does a person who pledges his or her life to service in God and care of souls do a 180 and now participates in black masses and so forth? I can only speculate on the enticement of worldly pleasures that slowly breaks down and pulls a person away from his or her vocation, but there has to be a starting point, i.e. participation in a dark ritual, where the priest or nun or whoever is like, okay, totally cool with this. I guess that is my question, and I apologize if it took so long for me to get to it. I am reminded, too, of Malachi Martin's comment with Art Bell on a person being perfectly possessed and content with it. Could that be it? Love the book club, Frank. Can't wait for the next one when Windswept House is done. So, yeah, that is something there. I would love to ask a guest in the future, what is the allure? I mean, what do people still go in? I mean, we know from Paul's time in the seminary, why he left. Because he saw that people were being trained and encouraged to secularize, to fetishize, to become a lot more lax and a lot more sexual and a lot more open-ended, and getting away from those old, those vows of chastity, even if it's just heterosexual chastity. I would have to say that maybe the grooming starts in the seminaries. Then again, before the seminary, what makes people on the outside even want to go to the seminary anymore? That's what I want to know, because the culture we know is largely a groomer culture. So what makes somebody want to go in? I guess maybe just the I don't know, the whole demeanor of church life, and this is across all denominations, because we see we see this happening in every church, every community. There's something like this has popped up over the last thing. So it's not just the Catholic Church. It's just the most prominent. So I don't know. What do you think, Tim? Where does that path start?
I think it's a little more direct. Remember the testimony before the House Commission on American Activities by a reverted Bella Dodd, who was an American spy who had worked directly for Stalin. Her job was to implant in place 1,100 homosexual communist men into the seminaries. And when she reverted, she swore before, House or Senate commission that she'd done this, worked directly for Stalin. And when she reverted, the person who reverted her was the Cardinal Archbishop of Century City's nemesis, the goodly, about-to-be saint, Archbishop Fulton Sheen, good man, nemesis with the major American antagonist in this novel. He reverted her, and she told him, and she also told Alice von Hildebrand, who recently passed away at about 97 years old, and her husband, Dietrich von Hildebrand, one of the 20th century's great liturgists in the church. She told the pair of them, the three of them, that she had done this. She said, look, I was tasked by Stalin himself to corrupt the church, and there's no CIA vetting process for the seminaries. This is how you get all of the black mass, Satanist, homosexualist, pedo guys in the priesthood. They have to be brought in. So they're brought in as double agents. They're plants. So they receive the ontological mark of priest on the soul, but they go in with a bad will. And this is also reflected by a couple other documents. The the Confessions of AA 1025, which was a dossier received after a motorcycle accident by a communist plant in the Canadian church. French Canadian nun, nun tended to him, and he had no name aside from 1025, and he was one of Bella Dodd's 1100 plants, allegedly. She told Archbishop Fulton Sheen and Alice von Hildebrand that 4 or 5 of her 1100 plants had risen as high as you can go in the curia, in the cardinalate, by the way.
Oh.
And then the nun nurse received those documents, Confessions of AA 1025. And if we go a little bit further back into the 19th century, interception by Pius IX's Cardinal Secretary of State of the permanent instruction of the Alta Vendita, which was the highest Italian Masonic lodge, saying that what they're going to be doing over the next 100 years, middle 1800s to middle 1900s, was precisely that, going to the seminaries and get essentially a Sankt Gallen mafia who makes a pope that might not have actually been a Mason, but just had one mind with them. And so they're going to the seminary. So it's all, and then there's a book called Goodbye Good Men, how the seminaries were all gay and they were all implanted as gay. So I think that's the answer to the question pretty directly.
What was, you said the Alta Vendita was 18th century or 19th?
19th century, like 1800s. Yeah.
Okay, because it's incredible. I know that Adam Weishaupt, who was a Jew who converted, who went to Catholicism, and then became. Hold on, and then it was the Mason. What the hell was it? Hold on a second. Is Adam Weishaupt? He was the one that came, who really put together the whole idea of the Illuminati, and he finished his work on May 1st, 1776. I mean, that's why we have May Day. This is where it all comes together. But even those writings, those were intercepted. There were a couple of really key interceptions that could have saved the world. They could have definitely saved France from its bloody revolution. George Washington was a little bit too much, because even the American Revolution, in some respects, they say it was instigated by these types of disrupting forces. But of course, George Washington was a little bit more too much for them to handle, I believe. But it's interesting how all these intercepted messages could have been, how some of them have helped and others have been ignored, and we're really paying the price for it. It's just incredible. I can't wait to get a little bit more into the Alta Vendita, because I know that there's something there to learn from. Let's get a little bit more here. Moira in New York City says, Frank, it's taken me much self-discipline not to read ahead. I appreciate this book club enabling me to savor the beautiful prose and details included by Malachi Martin. These 40 pages were powerful and quite emotional, a brilliant weaving of family, friendships, loss against the background of faith and geopolitics. Tricia and Father Aldo Carnesecca figuratively and literally giving up their lives as faithful servants of God. The Slavic Pope's frightening prophetic delirium at the beginning of these pages, and his tears upon hearing of the horrible organ harvesting of the Russian abortionists at the end. The MCH nurse here crying along with him. Full circle of demonic imagery and actions in these 40 pages. So much for the Partnership for Peace in the early 1990s, Russia and U.S. joining forces to achieve geopolitical goals, clearly deep state and deep church building up against the Slavic Pope on his mission from Our Lady of Fatima. Will the secret ever be revealed? And then finally we have here, our last comment, is at CM Axon. Says, Even though I knew Father Aldo was going to be murdered soon, I still cried when it happened. And again, when Christian got the call. Bastards. Yes. Yeah, though, it's been serious. Let's see here. In the chat room right now, PJ says, no good seminaries. All have gone woke. John Otter, I have not finished yet, Jerry. I'm still, let's see here, deep plantings. Oh, they're talking about something else. Talking about planting gardens, I think.
We're talking about plants, Russian Soviet
I know,
plants.
yeah, Soviet plants, they're planting gardens.
Yeah.
Let's see. Everybody's having a good time. Anyway, but still, that's all I have over here, Tim. This is Session 7. What I have come up with for our next segment is like another 50 pages. I figure at this point I want to savor it. The first couple of weeks we did 100 at a time, but we started off at, we left off at 479, and I picked the end of chapter 45. So that's 523. From 479 to page 523, we'll be faced with the beginning of chapter 46. So 479 to 523. That's what we will do for next Friday night, June the 10th. And my, oh my, I can't wait. Anything else that's just kicking around your head, Tim?
Okay, a couple things here. Number one, I'll be fast. This is a dumbass question. I didn't catch Trisha dying. Where did Trisha die?
Die? She died? No.
That's what that one question said, I thought.
No. Well, Father Aldo died.
Father Aldo died.
Yeah,
I thought he said that both Father Aldo and Trisha.
It was a literal and a figurative sacrifice, she said. Yeah. So okay. Father Aldo he has left this earth, but Trisha it talked about how she pled with God Almighty to let her take on some of the punishment for this wayward priest who had left and gotten married and all that stuff. And so she offered herself up as a sacrifice for somebody else's redemption. So even though it's not necessarily figurative, because it's once again a physical offering of oneself, but still, obviously it wasn't the ultimate price that Father Aldo had paid for sure. So yeah, no, Trisha is still alive. Okay, we're good there then, because I was like, I mostly caught up this past week. I was about 10 pages shy of where you stopped, but I wanted to make sure I hadn't missed a... No, you have not. But there's also something else going on with you over there. You were telling me about a situation with somebody and a child in need. Please let everybody know about this, because I'd like to help. Yeah, thanks, Frank. I've come to you guys with a GoFundMe before. This is actually my godson, my nephew. Just yesterday, we found he had leukemia. And it showed, just been a lot going on my end. So if people want to help, first off, number one, we appreciate your prayers. His name is Theo Curvers. He's 5.5 going on 6. And it's my godson and my nephew, my first cousin's son. My first cousin is like my brother. And so it's just created a real upset in my family, obviously. I've come to you guys before with fundraising for I think, another Catholic family or Christian family. So if people want to help, this is called Help Theo Curvers, Kurvers, Beat Leukemia, organized by Dan Fitzpatrick. That is Help Theo Curvers, Beat Leukemia, organized by Dan Fitzpatrick. It's been a weird couple days because he's a real special kid. And it was hard to talk to my cousin yesterday. They've had a lot going on, and we're getting those new digitized updates through their hospital, and it's just really weird. So yeah, please, your prayers, and if you have any money to kick over to them, they're going to be fighting this thing for them. They're going to have a fucking shitty next 2 or 3 years. That's just what happens. These are the breaks. These are the beats, and you give it to God and suffer with Jesus on the cross, but it's tough to tell a 5.5-year-old kid, Yes, it is, and I'm so sorry. And I, make sure you give me that link so I can put it in the description of this episode, and I'll also bring it up on one of the 7 o'clock shows next week as well. And I have a very generous audience, and I'd like to do something. Yes.
You really do. Man. So everyone, just prayers, please, and whatever you have. $5 goes a real long way for my cousin and his family, because they don't. At the beginning of it, you don't know where it's going to go. One bit of good news I wanted to bring out, and I nearly forgot about, is that Charles Coulomb, who is a man myth legend on his own accord, has agreed to join us either next Friday or the Friday after that, whatever's preferable to you, Frank El Capitan.
This is your friend who knew Malachi Martin.
He had dinner with him in Malachi Martin's New York phase many, many times, and has shared firsthand Malachi Martin lore. The guy's a myth. The guy is larger than life, Malachi Martin. Actually, so is Coulomb himself. Catholics in your audience will know.
Oh gosh,
huge personality. You'll love
this.
Coulomb.
Is going to be great.
Right.
So then you know what? Let's book him as far out as we can. So if you say this week or next, the 10th or the 17th, let's get him for June 17th, and then well, that's the only thing. Like, what do we do? Do we? Because if we do book club that night, well, we'll talk about this off air. It's great. It's great that he's agreed to come on. Please send me over the fundraising link, because I'll make sure that everybody knows about it. And I thank you again for another night in the cockpit with me over here. Send my best to the family, and yeah, man, I'm looking forward to session 8.
You too, buddy.
All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Timothy Gordon. And ladies and that's TimothyJGordon.com. That's the end of this week. It is 10 o'clock on the dot over here on the East Coast. If this was a Saturday night, I would just be starting the broadcast. So I've been here since 5:30. Been live since 7. I've been working pretty much all day. Little breaks to go outside with the baby and just enjoy the day, work out, cook myself some lamb, broke my fast at 2 p.m. Now I got to eat something else. But it's the weekend, so I don't fast on the weekend. I can eat as much as I want, wherever I want. Thank you for the support. Thank you for everything. Email me, get in on that link, and get in on the thread, talk to each other, and Monday is a new week. Good night.